Tape Deck Media.
Hi there, I am Elisa Bonnafous, and I am the host of a brand new podcast called Holler and Wine. I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I genuinely love talking to people. And despite the fact that I do not care for the sound of my own voice, I've got a podcast now. So please come join us. We're going to have really good conversations. We're going to talk about cocktails, and I am going to give my guests a tarot card reading because why not? So join us on Holler and Wine. Hope to see you soon. Well, it's a podcast, so it's hear you soon? That sounds weird.
Bonjour, mon ami, and welcome back to another episode of Riddle Me This. I am, as always, your faithful host, Monsieur Glouton Taylor Ruddle. This week I'm going to be joined by, yet again, another Renaissance human, somebody that wears a lot of hats, has a lot of talents, and gets up to a lot of stuff. It is Elisa Bonnafous. Elisa hails from France, hence my terrible French at the start of this episode, but she's living up in Auckland, where she is a mainstay in some of the comedy shows up and around in Auckland. She's also into all sorts of stuff like photography. She's a very good writer. She's got all sorts. She has a winemaking degree. I think she's also got skills in civil engineering. Basically, she has a lot of talents, and she's a very, very interesting person to talk to. The chats we had on the podcast actually really reminded me of the sort of chats that I used to have with people back when I was living in Japan. I was living in a share house called Chalet-style Hakata, which was a sort of cross between an apartment complex and a hostel, because it was sort of used for both. There was those of us that lived there long term, but it had shared kitchens and like a shared kind of space in the centre, so you were always running into people that were just sort of passing through. And I remember having many a night where I would run into a traveller, much like Elisa and myself, with all sorts of eclectic skills and hobbies. We'd stay up until like 2 a.m. talking about this and that and everything, and then you'd never see them again, as they'd be off to, you know, the next city, the next town, whatever it was, and I would be there because I was living there. So it was a lot of fun to be able to experience a conversation like that once again. I didn't realise how much I missed it. The quote of the day for this episode is, if you're willing to do things others aren't, you'll have results that they won't. Now I heard it for the first time being said by the YouTube interviewer Chris Van Vliet, but I'm sure it's probably a quote that's been out there in the ethos for a while. And I absolutely agree with it. I think it's a great way to distinguish yourself from the competition when you're trying to make it in a creative field. Several years ago, somebody described me as a prolific joke writer, but I sort of disagree. I feel like if you were prolific, things would be coming to you fully formed, and basically my response was just, well, no, I'm just willing to to basically die on stage, 6 times so that the joke will work on the 7th time. Like, there's nothing genius or intelligent about what I do. It's just stubbornness more than anything. But that said, a lot of comics don't want to bomb. They don't want their, their jokes not to work. So they just sort of, it's a bad habit some comics get into, is falling back on the hits and stuff that works and just sort of doing that for longer than they should. So yeah, if you're willing to do things that others aren't, you'll have results that they won't. Alrighty, enough out of me. Very excited for you to hear this one. It's a fantastic chat. Elisa is hilarious and interesting, and I had a great time talking to her. So please, Ruddlemaniacs, Ruddaholics, and Ruddlers out there, please welcome to the show, Elisa Bonnafous. Okay, hello Elisa. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. I've seen your name around quite a bit. Like, I think you were doing a little bit of a mini tour of the South Island of your show.
South Island, North Island. I went to Auckland, Wellington, Dunedin, and I'm going to Whangarei next week.
Awesome. How did you play? You played the inch bar in Dunedin?
Yeah, exactly.
How did you find the inch bar?
That was nice. That's a good settings.
Yeah.
But I got a bit unlucky in the term of the date that I chose because
Really?
like in 3 days there were like three very big show at the same time in Dunedin. So
Devastating.
obvious. Yeah, so it's like, okay, you have 400 tickets for comedy in 3 days in Dunedin. Obviously, that was.
Oh, wow. That's devastating.
But that was okay.
Yeah, we just have to keep going, right?
Exactly.
So the show title is Am I a Surfer Now? I was always curious about the title of that. Where did the title come from?
Well, the one of the theme in the show is surfing, because I started to take surf lesson last year, and it's about also when you do an activity, when an activity that you do become something that you are, like an activity became an identity. Also,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Do you know a comedian called Jeff Wilson? You might not.
Maybe.
He's more of an improv guy at times, but
no, I know him. I know him.
We were just talking about identity the other day, so this is crazy. That's a really smart question for a comedy show. But sorry, I interrupted you. Please keep talking.
No, and it's a question because you never know when you become something, and it's also, the show is also about like my last year when I was in. Last year I lived in Paris, and I had a bunch of stuff happening to me that was kind of not really nice. Then the switch to when I moved here and everything kind of cleared out, and I tried like I changed identity also. Like moving here, and it's a question because you never really know when you become something. Like when can you tell that, like, oh, I'm a stand-up comedian? When can you start saying that? Like,
it's so different, right?
Yeah. Is it the first time that you do an open mic? Is it the first time you get paid? Is it the first, like, when you do it 3 times a week for a year? Like, when can you tell that? And so it's always a question. I
feel like we have such a loose definition of pro comedian in New Zealand as well. Like, a lot of people call themselves pros, but maybe it's a little autism coming through, but I get stuck on like definitions sometimes. And I think the definition of pro is that like you do it for your profession, which is not true for many people. But then I also think, well, what are we supposed to call it? You know, like you can sort of call it maybe the upper level comedians or something. But yeah, it's such a gray, a wide gray area for that, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's the same for surfing. Like, are you a surfer when you start your first lesson of surfing, when you own your board, when you go pro? Like, you can't really tell. I
was watching it was a TV series. You probably wouldn't know them. Well, actually, how long have you been over in New Zealand for? Was it just about a year ago, you said?
2 years. 2 years. Yeah.
So there was this Australian comedic duo called Hamish and Andy, and one of their pranks they did was one of them entered in a bodybuilding show, but he's not a bodybuilder at all. And the guy who was judging, he said something, he referred to him as an athlete, and the guy was like, I'm an athlete. And the guy says to him, you're an athlete when you walked in here, you're an athlete when you walk out of there. So like, maybe it is up to you. It's like, I would consider you a surfer. You surf better than I do. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm shit also. So like I took 7 lessons of surfing. I stood up once or twice or something. Like I moved more time in my life than I surfed. So does that make me like a professional mover?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that leads quite nicely. We were going to have a bit of a chat about travel today. You have done quite a lot of international travel. How many times have you moved country?
So I lived in 3 countries. I lived in France, obviously, because I'm French.
That's a great place to start,
yeah. If you got tell by the accent, right?
Yeah. You could be Canadian, I guess. The accent is different for French Canadian, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be very different. Yeah.
Can you understand French Canadians talking?
Yeah, I can. I think I had a chat with a Canadian like last week about that. I think we can understand each like 80% of or like 90% of what we say.
Yeah, yeah.
But there is like expression that we don't use the same. And
Yeah.
sometimes the accent is so different that maybe it's like I don't know if it's the good word, but unsettling. Like you're like, oh, can you repeat that? I didn't get that.
Because it sounds like you should be able to understand it, right? But you're like, something's different.
Oh, the accent is so different. Sometimes it's really hard for me to understand people who speak French Canadian.
Yeah, yeah.
So I lived in 3 countries. I lived in France, Hungary, in Europe, and New Zealand. But I traveled a lot in Europe mainly, but I went to the US a bit. I went to China for a while, and I went to Australia last month.
So you are, I'm going to guess actually this word sounds French, but you are kind of a Renaissance woman, I think. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I
you
think
do
that
a lot of
would be
travel.
fair.
You have several are you a photographer by trade?
I'm a civil engineer.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's the degree that I have. And I have a specific degree in that also. Yeah. I also have a wine certification.
Right. Okay. Yep. Is that just because you come from France? Like they just, there you go. You know what you're talking about here.
No, it's more, my parents-in-law are really knowledgeable about wine.
Yeah.
They have people making wine in their families. So they are very knowledgeable about that. And at some point I was like, okay, everything is mixed up in my mind. I can't really understand everything that, like, you give me a lot of information, but I'm lost.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something to like more study wise, like to be sure that every information I had in my head was like in the right space.
Yeah.
And so I did like the first level of certification, and I was like, oh, I love it. Actually, it's really nice. And then all the things that happened in France the last year I lived there end up with me not having a job for a while.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do the next level of certification. And then I'm going to do the next level of certification. So now I have like a wine certification.
So does that mean you could make wine if you wanted to?
No, that means I can be a sommelier, for example, in a restaurant, or I can sell wine really easily in shop.
Yeah. Okay.
It's more like I know how to taste it and to describe it, and to know if it's a good wine and how to pair it with some food.
Gotcha. So is that something have you ever worked as that, or you could if you needed to?
So last year, here in New Zealand, I worked in a shop that sells French products, including wine, but I was in the marketing team.
Oh,
I don't have a degree in marketing. I just
look, so many marketing jobs. They seem like because again, like you, I don't have a degree in it or anything, but I have done it for stand up because we have to be marketers, and a lot of them don't even necessarily say they want qualifications. They just kind of want to know that you can do it. So
exactly.
I say go for it, right?
And I was French. I knew how to, at some point, I did some marketing for a YouTube channel at some point in my life also. So I did a bit of graphic design. I did a bit of social media. So I was like, and I'm great at Excel. The bosses were really happy about that. And so I did like a year of kind of random stuff at their place. So I did that connected to wine. Other than that, I never worked in a restaurant or something, but I could if I wanted to.
Yeah, you could probably always fall back on it, as they say, right?
Yeah. And I do photography quite a lot at the moment. So I do like show photography. I started to do posters for comedians. I'm doing headshots for comedians also. So that's something that is growing. And I'm a stand-up comedian. So.
It's funny how many skills you pick up in life that contribute to being a stand-up. Like when I was studying in graphic design, they always used to say, like, you're probably not going to all end up working as designers, but some of the skills that you learn doing this, you'll use in other areas. And at the time, I'm being like, what are you talking about? When would this come in handy? And then as soon as I started running shows, I was like, all right, I can just make all the posters. So yeah, you kind of become like a one-person business, becoming like an entertainer. How did you used to do stand-up back in France?
Not really. I did some theater classes when I was a teenager, and I wanted to be a comedian when I was a teenager. And then society, teachers, parents, they were like, "You're so great at math. You should be an engineer."
Right,
and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be an engineer, apparently." And I did that.
Yeah.
And I was miserable. So at 30, I was like, okay, let's try to find joy again. And so I had a friend that just started stand-up comedy like a few months back. And so I was like, oh, how did you start it? And she told me that she knew someone who did like writing workshop for stand-up. So it's basically 2 hours in an afternoon. You have like a little group of people.
Yeah.
And then right after that, in the evening, there is a show with a more established comedian, but there is like 30 minutes at the beginning for the people who wants to go on stage. So I did that. And I wrote during the session, and I was like, okay, that's not funny at all. But then the evening I went on stage and I was like, okay, I'm so funny. And that everyone was really laughing. And I had this feeling of, okay, that's my place in the world. I'm supposed to be on stage. That's where I will find joy. Awesome. So I did just 2 workshops in France, but I didn't have the time to go deeper because I moved to New Zealand. So when I arrived here, I was like, the first week I was there, I was like, okay, I need to find out how I can go on stage in this country. And I really started here, basically.
That's funny. My path was a little bit similar. Like, I had just heard about some open mics that I could do when I was living here. And then sort of through random circumstances, I ended up moving to Japan. But then when I was in Japan, they actually had an opportunity to do stand-up there. So it's funny how those massive travel events, my sort of stand-up started, I guess my intentions to do it started bubbling up just before I moved across the world. So very, very interesting that we have a kind of similar thing there. When you were over there, were you doing stand-up in French?
The 2 workshops that I did, it was in French. Yeah.
Interesting. So what, this is an interesting question. So I speak Japanese and English, right? And when you switch to another language, sometimes it feels like your personality switches a little bit just based on the linguistic, I guess the structure of the language, your personality changes. Do you feel like you have kind of like an English Elisa and a French Elisa?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's the linguistic, but also the thing that you used to hear in this language. For example, I feel like English, it's really easy for me to talk about my emotion in English compared to French.
Right.
Because first, I think because it's my second language, there is like a disconnect. So it's easier to talk about it.
Doesn't feel as personal sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. And also because I used to watch a lot of content about like mental health, emotion on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. But every content that I watch about that is mostly in English. So I have the vocabulary to talk about it in English very precisely. As in France, we are not there yet in terms of mental health. There is a lot of people who talk about it, but it's not as common as in English. Because you have less content in French than in English.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, because there is probably less people that speak French than English, especially also because there is a lot of people who maybe English is not their first language, but they would speak on the internet in English to have a broader audience.
So
you find I find more content in English.
Yeah, I think it's the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are there any other differences that you notice? I'm trying to pinpoint ones that I feel like. Me in Japanese is a lot blunter than in English because the structure of it is like a single word can mean almost like an entire sentiment. Like one of my favorite words in Japanese is zannen, which just means like can mean anything like that's a shame, I'm disappointed, I feel sorry for you, blah blah. But like you're actually only saying two syllables, and so I feel like the version of me speaking Japanese feels a little bit like a caveman at times, just kind of like grunting and yep, and saying very little, but actually saying quite a lot. That's one of the big changes I can think of. But yeah, it's very interesting how it must be something to do with the way our brain, the synapses are shorter for a certain language. And yeah, I don't have any kind of expertise in this, but it's always interesting to talk to people that speak multiple languages.
Yeah.
Do you
and
have
the humor? The
No, please go
humor
ahead.
is also different.
Yes,
The
yeah.
humor between French and English is so different that sometimes, because in English, the basic structure when you want to make a joke in English is you would have the more important word or the big twist at the end. It has to be the last word when you make a joke. In French, you can't play as much as the structure of the sentence. So it matters less if the big word is at the end.
Yeah, very interesting.
And so French people, they would laugh more about a situation, kinda, and less with a twist. They would laugh if there is a twist. They will laugh at the twist, but it doesn't have to be a twist to make people laugh. As in English, if you don't have this last word that is the main thing of the sentence, people will be like, I don't know when to laugh.
Yeah,
as French
very
people,
interesting.
they will listen to you, and at the end of the sentence they will laugh, but not because there is a twist, because the sentence was funny.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, with English stuff, you really need that sort of rug pull moment where you like get them. You have to like sneak up on them almost, right?
Yeah. And I wonder also, because I feel like stand-up is newer in France than in English speaker language countries. And so I wonder if here in English, people are so used to this rhythm, and so they expect this rhythm. As in French, you can be more creative because it's newer in French. So I wonder, that's the first time I think about that particular thing, but that may be a thing.
I think you're right. I have a joke that I think it feels more, now that you've mentioned that, it feels more French than it feels English, because the joke is, how we're going through an energy crisis, or we're about to go through an energy crisis in New Zealand. All of the politicians are warning us, we're going to run out of power and all this kind of thing. So the joke I was thinking was that I was about to get ready to go for a run, and then I saw a thing on the news that said, please conserve energy. So I thought, yep, cool. And then I went and had a sleep on the couch and put the air conditioner on. And, because the twist doesn't happen really, it's a really slow twist. And so I think just maybe the image is funnier of me me kicking my feet up and lying on the couch and then feeling really smug that I'm helping the country.
I also went in Auckland. There is an open mic for Spanish speakers.
Cool.
So I went there. So my Spanish is not great, but I was able to understand half of it. I was able to understand the context of the joke and maybe some of the joke, but that meant I was able to focus about the audience and how people reacted. Yeah. And that was even more than in French. Like, people would listen to you and be focused for even like 2 minutes before there is a laugh. Yeah. And because the story is funny and people are engaged with the story, and you don't have to laugh every like 20 seconds. Yeah. As in English, you can't do that. Otherwise, people are like going around and they don't listen to you.
Exactly. Yeah, they need like boom, 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 boom kind of thing. You even have to put in oh, okay, there's been too long since the last laugh, so I need to put in a laugh here. But
Yeah,
so with
yeah,
Spanish, and is it with French as well? They'll actually give you the benefit of the doubt that like it's probably going to go somewhere funny, so we'll just let you get to the point, and we're not
yeah.
going to.
They would wait until you get the story. It's more
Yeah.
like, I feel like it's more like when you tell an anecdote to a friend,
Yeah.
right? You don't tell it the same way on stage and to a friend. And French people, they would be more inclined to listen to you as an anecdote that you tell to a friend.
Yeah, yeah. That's really fascinating. It's just cool to see, like, because I've had some friends, they've just opened a comedy bar in Tokyo, so they're gonna really start. We're gonna now see stand up in Japanese start to take off again. So it'll be interesting to see what their style, I guess, is going to be like. So it's all fascinating to see. I feel like I had another question about the languages. Oh, I was going to say I'm looking forward. I'm going to interview Summer. How do you pronounce Summer's last name? Summer Shah.
Shah, yeah.
Yeah. So she runs like a Chinese English open mic night.
Yeah, so they have. So I think she has someone who does the admin part of it, but she's always on. So it's from what I know, the one I went to, it's like half the act are Chinese or speaks Chinese, and half of the rest of it speaks English. Because I think also there is not enough people who speak Chinese to have like a monthly lineup that changes. So
of course.
And from what she told me, it's also a way for them to introduce people who are from China to stand up in a way that they would be less not scared, but like nervous about not understanding everything.
Yeah.
And that's the same that we did with immigrant. Did you hear about that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So all the acts are in English, but a lot of them, me included, and Summer and Annie, it's not our first language, English. So we have a lot of audience that come and they are immigrants also, so they can relate to the story, and maybe English is not their first language. So it's the first step to stand up that feels easier, because when you go to a show and everything is English by Kiwis or by British people or people from the US, there is a rhythm that maybe you don't understand everything. And Kiwis, they do a lot of joke about very specific Kiwis thing that makes sense, obviously. But when you're an immigrant, you're like, I don't have this common ground with you, so I don't understand half the jokes. So making a show about it's not about immigrants, but it's by immigrants. It's like a first step to stand up. That
you're all kind of looking at it through the same lens, right? You've got this shared kind of I think that's really clever. I never actually thought about that, like as a way to encourage. Like it's kind of like you're easing people into the style of stand up, but the bar to entry is quite low and relaxed. So that's quite clever. I quite like that.
Yeah. I had a lot of French, my French community here. I have a lot of friends that came to a lot of my shows, and the result is like what they tell me is always, oh, that was easier to understand you than the other. And so and when they come to immigrant, it's always easier for them to understand the whole show than if they go to the classic, for example, or something like that.
I because I was living overseas, and it was like we were very much the same, where we were doing stand up in English, but we learned very quickly that even though everyone in the audience spoke English, it wasn't their native tongue. So I had to train myself to speak in a more general way and not use too much Kiwi slang or super niche references that people that grew up in like Germany or something wouldn't get. But that's been quite good, because I think is a good habit to get it into, because then when you start posting stuff online, we didn't know online was going to be the the big thing back in 2014 when I started. But now I think it's paid off because of how international the world is. So yeah, it was a good habit to learn. And yeah, I think the idea of what you're doing with immigrants, it's quite a hard word to say, it's quite smart. I think it's very, very cool.
Yeah. No, yeah.
No, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just checking my little list. I was thinking I might start hitting you with some questions from my little list shortly. But if you're going to say something, go right ahead.
No, I just wanted to circle back on that if we needed to conclude.
You've picked that part of English up, circling back. You've assimilated into the culture very well there. Let's go through some of these. So here, what is a good one to start with? Okay, so here is a question from my list of good interview questions. Do you have a skill that people would be surprised to learn you have? I guess maybe the wine thing is we've already covered it, but do you have another skill that you think people would be surprised to learn you have? Surfing?
I don't. It's really hard for me to answer that because everything that I do, I feel like everything can do it and it's normal. Right. And it's just when people tell me, oh, that's crazy that you can do that I think about it. Like, it's like when I do stand up, a lot of people come to me and say, oh, you're so brave. You're so brave. And in your second language, oh, you're so brave. And I don't relate to the brave thing because for me, it's not about bravery. It's about finding my joy. And it's not hard for me to go on stage and talk to 30 people or 100 people. It's not, that part of life is not hard for me. No. The hard part for me is go to the post office and do small talk to the person and understanding the admin.
Call the dentist's office and make a booking or something, right?
Yeah. I can't do that.
That's okay. Okay, so next question. Do you have a motto for your life?
Find joy.
Find joy. There you go.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have a famous food from history that you would like to go back in time and try?
Ooh, food.
Food or drink, anything really.
Food or drink. Well, if we're talking about the wine, I would be very curious to drink wine that was in the they were drinking when Rome was an empire.
Yeah, okay.
Because they would mix a bunch of stuff with the wine, like water, spices, honey, and stuff like that. So that must be very different from the wine that we know currently. So
100%. I also am going to have to play. I have a little jingle whenever the Roman Empire comes up on my podcast. I have some music that I'm going to put in post here. So
Roman Empire's on our mind. Every day we hear rewind. History we can't ignore. Glory days we still adore.
Fantastic. We've hit the quota of Roman Empire references throughout the show. Hell yeah.
Tick. Do you have a bingo card also?
I really need to start making one, don't I? Oh, okay. Fantastic. We are true to form. So, what else do I have on here? Do you think you would survive in a zombie apocalypse?
No, I will be the first one to die.
The first one to go. Any particular reason?
Because I don't want to live through it. I will be like
reasonable.
Zombie. Yeah, just. I don't know, eat me, I will go through the window. I don't want to live that. I don't have the optimism. I'm so pessimistic about the future. If something big happens, I'm like, I'm out of it. I don't want the struggle. I don't care. I don't care at this point.
Fair enough. Here's one I like. Do you have a sick day ritual? Like whenever you get sick, do you have a ritual?
My ritual is, I was thinking about that the other day, is to believe that I'm not sick.
Oh, yeah,
that I'm faking it.
Yeah.
Every time I'm like, oh, I'm so sick. And then there is a little voice in my head that is like, I'm sure you're faking it. I'm sure
Yeah.
you just want attention and you're not really sick. So I'm trying to force myself doing
Yeah.
stuff. And sometimes I'm more productive when I'm sick than when I'm not, because
Wow.
this little voice in my head is like, no, you're faking it. Just go back to work.
That's like gaslighting you into getting better.
Yeah, exactly. But the
My-
other day I got the flu and I was like, no, I'm sweating so much that
I refuse. Yeah.
I'm sick. I'm sick. Just enjoy it.
I have a friend who's a hypnotist who actually helped me. This is a mental thing. He helped me get around it where he was teaching me to reframe any symptoms you have for being sick. Like say you've got mucus or something, he would say, like, rather than being real down on yourself and, oh, I'm so sick, he said, that's actually a good thing. That means your body's fighting back against the infection. And if you've got a fever, it means your body's fighting back against the infection. And genuinely that helped me feel less down in the dumps when I was sick, because I thought, no, we're all right. I can kind of soldier on. So the mind is a powerful thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but now I accept when I'm sick better, because I noticed that I have a headache when I'm sick, and I never have a headache in everyday life.
Wow.
I have a lot of things in my body, but headache is not a thing. So every time I have a headache, that means I'm sick. So.
That's like the light on the dashboard of your car, you know, like it comes on, you're like, yep, okay, we are legit sick. Oh, okay. Here's one more, and then we will get some plugs in. So, do you have a TV show or a movie or an album or anything like that that you would like to recommend to the listeners of the podcast?
I would like to plug The Artist Way. That is a method by Julia Cameron. That is a 12-week method to reconnect with your creativity.
Wow.
So, and I've done it twice now, and that's how I started stand-up and everything. So that's like a very powerful, so in French is libérez votre créativité. I have it here. I have it here.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not very big, but
it's doable. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically the core of it is you have to write every morning pages, like without judgment and everything. And every week you have to make an artist appointment with yourself and do something creative. And you have a bunch of exercise where you can do stuff or write about stuff. And it's more like therapeutical. I can't say it, this word.
Therapeutical.
No, exactly.
There we go.
And after 12 weeks, you grow so much and you feel more comfortable with creativity. And
it almost feels like it's like I'm like this with exercise. I've got a punching bag in my shed that I do like a 20-minute kind of workout on. And if the days that I think, I can't be bothered today, like I always tell myself, like, just go light. You don't have to do a full workout. But your body, it's like the engine kind of warms up, and then I'm like, okay, I'm into it now. Is it a bit like that? You're kind of kickstarting your creativity through these activities. That's very cool. I'll begin to recommend that.
You can start very small. It's like the first thing that she says, like, just buy stickers and put them on a blank page. It doesn't have to be big. Just do that the first time. Or you can go to, I don't know, a museum and walk around, or you can start really small, and then when you build the confidence and the will, you can grow the activity and paint a painting. But that doesn't have to be the first thing that you do.
Awesome. Well, it's been genuinely really interesting chatting to you. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I want to bring you back for another episode and talk about this kind of identity stuff as well. But for right now, we're running out of time. Links. What are your social media links?
Everything is under Elisa Bonnafous. So Elisa Bonnafous.
Perfect. Okay, you've done that way quicker than most people that I have on the podcast. I was lucky enough to get all of mine. Taylor Ruddle Comedy is the same one, so fantastic. What else? Plugs are in. Okay, we've got a lot more time than I expected left in the Zoom chat. I'll ask you another question before we run out of time. So, what would be a good one? Do you have a favorite Wikipedia rabbit hole?
my rabbit hole, they just change. Every 2 months, I have a new one, and I would go so deep into it, like opening 18 links and going through it, but it changes every time. I don't have one specific. I would just, like, the last one I went on was music, like how to do music with like a little pad thing. And I went through a whole thing of music in the 80s and but also the electronics behind it, like how do you create sound and the how do you call that?
The waveform or whatever.
Yeah, the wave thing and like a whole thing. And that took me 2 months of my life where I was really into it. Then I bought one key thing for $100 secondhand.
Yeah.
Used it twice. Now it's in my cupboard, and I never used it. Really.
Fantastic. So, well, thank you for joining me, Elisa. It's been a genuine pleasure. I hope the rest of your day goes well.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. That was great.
Thank you for listening to Riddle Me This. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can find me on social media at Taylor Riddle Comedy on all the major platforms. You can also join patreon.com/Taylor Riddle Comedy for free, which gets you access to all sorts of extras and behind the scenes content, as well as allows you to communicate directly with me and let me know what you think of the show. Tune in again next Monday for another episode of Riddle Me This, and until then, Riddler out.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.
Hey Ruddlers, I joined a group of podcasters that we are calling the Trailer Alliance, a group of podcasters that share each other's trailers at the end of the episodes and generally support each other. So at the end of each episode for the next few weeks, I'm going to be playing a trailer of one of the members of the Trailer Alliance. And here's one of them now. I hope you like it.
What's up, everyone? This is JJ. Listen, I'm always wanting to try to engage with you all, but some of you are still so shy. Please don't be shy. I'm not going to bite. Hit me up on IG, lifepodcast_84. However, if you don't want to hit me on IG, you want to hit me through email, that's fine. You can hit me at thisisthelifepodcast84@gmail.com. Again, This is the Life Podcast 84@gmail.com. IG, Instagram, hit me, Life Podcast _84. Come on, y'all. Let's be live. Let's be active. Love.